Hello everyone, and welcome to some more horrific news. Okay, this one popped up, and Cameron and I have been talking about this for ages, so it's a bit of a "I told you so" article, but we'll have fun reading it on A roads. Movies are struggling in 2024, but one genre is thriving. Can you guess what genre it is? This hasn't been a great movie year, so far at least. From January to now, only a few truly incredible movies, like George Miller's Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, and Alex Garland's Civil War, have been released. The majority of the year's releases have, in fact, turned out to be either good or mediocre, and there have been more than a few outright terrible ones too. That's to say nothing of how uneven 2024's box office numbers have been, with films like Civil War and The Beekeeper overperforming, while seemingly obvious hits like The Fall Guy and Furiosa have fallen short of financial expectations for them. Some of the problems with this year's movie slate can, of course, be attributed to last year's writers and actors strikes, which will continue to have a prolonged impact on Hollywood's offerings. Certain issues could also be the natural result of studios and filmmakers trying desperately to adapt the audience's interests, which seem to be evolving on a more seismic scale than they perhaps ever have before. As a collectively disappointing as 2024's featured lineups have been though, it hasn't been a lackluster year for the horror genre. From The First Omen to Longlegs, this year has already delivered a number of truly striking, memorable horror movies, and there are plenty more still to come. Well, stripe me pink, but what a shock. Maybe because mainstream media do not have a clue, like all creativity went out of them. If you've followed our show in any shape or form, Cameron and I have talked about it, Steve and I have talked about it, Chris and I have talked about it, Dale and I have talked about it. The horror genre has always led the way in terms of creativity. From special effects, storytelling, concepts, leading trends, it's always been the horror genre since cinema was invented. From the advent of cinema, it's always been the horror genre that's opened the doors and had people coming in. It just breeds that type of creativity, and other franchises just cannot keep up. We have such a wide range of movies. You can be a horror fan and you can watch a different type of movie every day if you wanted. They're not all slashers. And slashers are fun too, you know what I mean? I'm not besmirching slashers. The only reason I'm saying that is because that's what a lot of people associate the horror genre with, because that tends to be the mainstream stuff that goes out. But any flavour of storytelling and you'll find it under the horror genre. It just goes right down to the basis of the human psyche. We like to be afraid. We like to hear scary stories. You know what I mean? At some level. Now, depending on the intensity, how much you enjoyed it, obviously the seasoned horror fan can watch more intense movies. Maybe the casual viewer, not so much, but still, there's a horror movie out there for you. If you've never thought about it before, just interesting that the mainstream have finally twigged on, oh, them horror people, oh, they're making good movies and people like them. Right, let's crack on. Spring saw the horror genre flourish. The year got off to a slow start for horror fans, with fun but forgettable releases like Night Swim and Lisa Frankenstein in January and February. Things began to pick up in late March and April, which brought films like Immaculate, Late Night with the Devil, The First Omen, and Abigail. Of these movies, director Arkasha Stevenson's First Omen is arguably the strongest, but almost all of them managed to shock both critics and casual viewers alike by going much further than anyone expected them to go. Since then, 2024's horror slate has only gotten better. I've talked about this before, as there are similar movies, but yeah, The First Omen might have done better in the box office because of name recognition, but I would say Immaculate was a better movie because it's an original concept. Late Night with the Devil, a lot of fun. I didn't mind The First Omen, it was a bit of cheesiness, but I wasn't blown away by it. And Abigail's on the list. I still haven't got around to Abigail yet. Sorry, please forgive me. It's coming. There's another movie marathon in the future. I just see all these flipping movies are building up. We haven't stopped covering movies. So yeah, stuff that might appear in the cinema, fair enough, but horror has not slowed down in the slightest. I just think it's funny. Anyway, let's go on again. That's thanks in no small part to genre-bending experiments like I Saw the TV Glow, another one on the list I've still to get round to watching, Handling the Undead, and In a Violent Nature, all of which boldly presented new twists and stories and tropes that audiences have otherwise seen before. In addition to the aforementioned films, the past few months have also delivered widely known acclaimed horror efforts like A Quiet Place Day 1, Maxine, and now Longlegs, as well as a number of other worthwhile international releases including You'll Never Find Me and Stop Motion. The future looks bright for horror. Just in case this year hasn't already impressed horror aficionados enough, the coming months promise to bring with them a slew of even more immensely promising additions to the genre. August slate includes M. Night Shyamalan's Trap and Zoe Kravitz's Blink Twice, both of which are shaping up to be entertaining and notably modern thrillers. Then there's Fede Alvarez's Alien Romulus, which looks like it'll bring back the unnerving body horror and suffocating claustrophobia that originally defined the sci-fi horror franchise. On top of Alien Romulus, we've also got Luz director Tillman Singer's intriguing new Dan Stevens and Hunter Schafer's led supernatural thriller Cuckoo coming in August. This fall's horror slate meanwhile includes Heretic, an exciting new A24 thriller. It stars Hugh Grant as a madman who traps a pair of young Mormon missionaries and decides to put their faith to the test, and James Watkins' remake remakes of the 2022 Danish breakout hit Speak No Evil. Parker Finn's Smell 2 is coming a month later in October, and already somehow looks even more playfully disturbed than his predecessor. Lest we forget, The Witch and the Northman director Robert Eggers' Nosferatu remake is also coming in late December, and it promises to send the year out in quite a terrifying bang. If the finished film turns out to be even half as gripping and effective as its startling teaser trailer, then it has a good chance of being an instant classic. And don't forget Terrifier 3, they've forgotten that one, it's coming out, and The Bride's coming out at some point. Is that this year or next year? God, there's tons. They're not even touching the surface, they're just going for the mainstream stuff. Diversity plus quality equals success. Several of this year's horror features have performed surprisingly well at the box office, and most of them have found their own audiences in the horror community in the days, weeks, and months since their respective debuts. Even more importantly, when you combine the films that have already been released with those that are coming out over the next few months, you get an assortment of horror movies that are wildly different from each other. It has quite simply been a long time since we've gotten such a diverse slate of both mainstream and obscure horror exercises. Whether you've been in the mood for a blockbuster spectacle, a brutal slasher flick, or a less conventional, disorientating thriller, 2024 has so far had a little bit of everything. If the films coming out in the second half of the year turn out to be either just as or more successful than those that have already been released, then it seems safe to say that 2024 will likely go down as one of the best years for the horror genre of this decade. I think they're popular just because the mainstream audience have nothing else. Horror hasn't really changed, let's be honest. Yeah, we've had a bit of a slow year at times during the pandemic stuff, but still, there's been an absolute plethora. Plus, this thing hasn't even touched the indie scene. Don't forget, horror fans do not rely on the cinema for movies. Horror fans will watch stuff in the cinema, they'll watch stuff at home, they'll go to festivals, they'll still buy physical media. The horror fan is not limited like other genres. Other genres are trend led, they'll jump on the latest thing and then it gets beaten to death, then they jump on the next thing, they beat it to death. The horror genre has never been like that. It's always been a diverse slate of movies. Like I said, you can watch a different movie every day and not be bored because you get a different type of story. The only difference is that the horror genre goes that extra mile. I think I've used the comparison to an action flick. Someone can be shot with a load of bullets in an action flick and it's fine because it's all cutscenes and that, where horror will show the impact of the bullets and go right through and show the actual visceralness of it and the pain of the person. You know, that's the difference between the horror genre. I've used like the Matrix Revolutions and Bad Boys 2 for car chase scenes. Compare that to Final Destination 2, and there's the major difference between other genres and the horror genre, because in the highway chase scene or the crash scene in Final Destination 2, it is visceral and there's no shying away from the impact. That's what the horror genre offers. And I think people are starting to realize now that every other movie looks the same. Look at what they mentioned, like those movies, they've been done 100 times. People have seen them 100 times. Yes, there is a bit of that. There's stinkers in horror, and I've covered a lot of them and have not held back. But there's still that desire to make a good movie, and there's still that desire to tell a good story that sets the horror genre apart from others. And that's why I'll always be a fan. It'll take a lot to turn me off horror, because even if I stop watching new films from, say, this date onwards, there's more than enough, like 10 lifetimes worth of material I could watch and still find new stuff. That's just the way it is, and long may it continue. I think that's the end of the article. Yep, right. So I just waffled on there and didn't even get to the end. That was it. Okay, so there you go. What do you think? This makes me smugly satisfied. I'll not lie. There is a little bit of up yours other genres, which gives me a little bit of pride as a horror fan. So to all the other genres out there, nah, 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 we are winning. You gotta have a bit of fun in the well. But there you go. Let me know what you think. Is anyone in the slightest way, shape, or form surprised at this news? There you go. Let me know what you think. And until next time, keep updated with the channel, do the type of clicky things, and remember to keep it creepy, keep it horrific.